6 years ago, I had the great fortune of visiting Reggio Emilia, Italy. As the educator of the supplementary school in Miami Beach, I observed other communities in order to further enhance our own learning program. And of course, on this trip, I was determined to visit Tempio Maggiore, the great synagogue of Florence. When I arrived, I was surprised to see that the entire compound of the synagogue was not only gated off, where you could barely see the gorgeous edifice and the teal dome, but in front of the grounds stood an Italian military guard with an M16 encased in bulletproof glass. Using hand motions and signals, I asked where the entrance was, and he coldly gestured that it was around the corner. When I arrived to the entrance, I was turned away and told I couldn't visit that day. I had to make an official appointment that included a background check where I needed to show my passport and other forms of ID. I pleaded with the man at the entrance, saying I was Jewish. I even tried to speak in Hebrew, tell him I was Israeli, I was an educator of a Jewish school. But nothing. He somewhat belligerently turned us away and ended the conversation abruptly. I was heartbroken in that moment, not because I was turned away so curtly, but because I felt like I missed the chance to see this beautiful place, a place I considered a home away from home, a place where I belong, a synagogue. I kept asking myself, what happened here? Why do they have such strict measures? Fast forward 6 years later to Colleyville, Texas, where last Shabbat, Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker personally opens the door to a man standing outside of his synagogue, inviting him inside. In true biblical form, Rabbi Citron Walker welcomed the ger, the stranger. And here was a rabbi embracing and living his values. Of course, we all know that this stranger took advantage of Rabbi Citron Walker's Jewish ideals. I couldn't help but ask myself, who got it right? The Italian synagogue that screens every single person to walk through their gate? Or Rabbi Citron Walker, who figuratively and literally opens the doors of the temple to others? Like many of you, I was completely wrecked when I heard that Rabbi Citron Walker was taken hostage along with several of his congregants last Saturday morning during Shabbat services. And this felt particularly painful as we had the great privilege of hearing the words of our neighbor and friend, Pastor Gibson, last week from this very bima speak about building a relationship with our African American and Black brothers and sisters. And Pastor Gibson reminded us that our work is cut out for us and that our country is still at war. He reminded us there's so much to be done and that minority voices are being swallowed and disregarded every day. And only 12 hours later did our friends, members of our community in Colleyville, Texas, find themselves in this horrific, life-threatening situation. Why? All because of hatred based on misinformation and ignorance. The perpetrator who held the rabbi and congregants at gunpoint first demanded that he speak to Rabbi Angela Bookdahl, the leader of Central Synagogue in New York City, as he alleged that she could free the Pakistani neuroscientist imprisoned on terrorist charges. His ignorance led him to believe that Jews control the world and that coming into a synagogue would allow him to speak to the chief rabbi of America in order to get what he needed. What had he experienced in his life that would lead him to imagine such absurdities? Unfortunately, we know he is not the only one to have encountered such falsities against Jews. The lists go on and on and on. Every day, people find inventive ways to produce hatred towards the Jewish people, a 2% American minority. On November 12th, just a few short weeks ago, we commemorated Kristallnacht, a night of broken glass, where 1938 Jewish shops in Germany were smashed and desecrated, and shortly thereafter led to the murder of millions. We remember these events with so much pain and sorrow, and yet we continue to generate new memories, like last weekend, harshly picking at a scab that just won't heal. To put it simply, anti-Semitism is real and is getting unbearably routine. It is running and coursing its way through the veins of our society in America and in Europe, and we cannot sit idly as it happens. In the moments after the Texas crisis, the FBI made an official statement declaring that the assailant was, quote, particularly focused on one issue, and it was not specifically related to the Jewish community. While the FBI later corrected its misstep, this incident reflects the general ignorance about anti-Semitism, even among people of goodwill. For centuries, we have been forced to confront materials that blame the world's problems and misfortunes on the Jewish people. This fabricated worldwide notion is attached to an invisible Jew, an idea of someone that isn't real. If we do not find a way to encounter the uninformed currents that threaten to overtake our society, we may find ourselves hostage to the very ideas that charge them. This ignorant status quo has proven to be increasingly dangerous for Jews and other minorities, which is reason enough for us to take them seriously. And it has equally disastrous consequences for all of society who have to deal with those individuals who do not have the ability to rationally solve their issues. As Bard College's Walter Russell Mead put it, people who think, quote, the Jews run the banks lose the ability to understand, much less to operate financial systems. People who think the Jews dominate business through hidden structures can't build or long maintain a successful modern economy. People who think the Jews dominate politics lose their ability to interpret political events, to diagnose social evils, and to organize effectively for positive change. This is exactly what happened in Texas. Someone's delusion led to terror. I turn to this week's Torah portion for a moment. Parashat Yitro gives us a sneak peek at an aspirational ideal. Moses and the Israelites are wandering in the desert, experiencing both their physical and spiritual raison d'être as a nation. Moses in this moment is trying to organize and lead his people, but becomes overwhelmed by everything he must do. His father-in-law, Yitro, who arrives to the Israelite camp with his daughter and her 2 sons, counsels Moses in his leadership. Yitro tells Moses to delegate some of the responsibilities, for the task is too heavy for one person and cannot be done alone. Moses wisely heeds the words of his father-in-law and appointed capable deputies to help solve difficult matters in the Israelite camp. Yitro is not from the Israelite camp, but develops a trusting relationship with Moses. At a time where the Israelites are so vulnerable and are just learning to interact with a God they are slowly getting acquainted with, Yitro, a stranger, established a partnership, a trust that is so profound that Moses welcomes him and his guides into the Israelite camp. Moreover, Moses learns that in that moment that every burden and responsibility is not for him to carry alone. Rather, the strength of a collective Israelites is what will bring them to the Holy Land. How do we get to our utopia? of not only living side by side with others, but developing such a trusting relationship where we grow to depend on one another? What do each and every single one of us need to do in order to get us there? In an interview with Rabbi Citron Walker, he said that most of the nearly 11 hours that he was held hostage consisted of sitting around, speaking with the FBI's hostage negotiator, and making conversation with the gunman. He said, "We listened to him, we answered his questions, we shared a little about ourselves, and every moment was terrifying." I wonder what this conversation would have looked like if there was no violence, no weapons, and no hostages. How would the gunman deal with his problems had he taken the time to speak to Rabbi Citron Walker and learned about the Jewish people without violence? Would he still have done this horrific act? I don't think so. In Judaism, everything is about preparation. We prepare candles, wine, and challah to welcome Shabbat. We set the table with all of the elements of the Seder before Pesach, Passover. We work hard during the week so we can have a restful and meaningful Shabbat. We spend the entire month of Elul reading Psalms and preparing our mind and body for Yom Kippur. Moses, Yitro, and the Israelites crossed the desert for 40 years to prepare themselves as a people to enter the Holy Land. What preparations do we need to do today in order to stop anti-Semitism from further penetrating our society? How can we participate in this endeavor and put an end to hatred in our world, where we truly love our neighbors as we love ourselves, where we can raise our children in a safe society? What preparation or work do we need to do to stop violence, hatred, and ignorance in our world? Because an injustice for one group is an injustice for all groups. Our morning prayers and parts of our Amidah read, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Blessed are you, God, sovereign of the universe, who frees the captives. Our friends in Texas recited this prayer last Shabbat. But in the days, weeks, months, and years to come, I ask that we free ourselves from the bondage, captivity that breeds hatred. None of us are exempt from doing this, and we can rest assured, just as Moses did, that we can rely on each other to share in the work that lies ahead. Shabbat Shalom.